Welcome back. So my extremely strong QA team that I have sitting testing my code, they found a few bugs in it. And the bugs, we're going to try and solve this lesson, just some of them that we found so far. Now this is what happens when you develop software. Now and then there are bugs that kind of get through the system because we're not doing a proper unit test setup. So we will try to go back to that later and get some unit testing into our systems. The first bug that I have right here is just a very simple one to check out, because the reason is I have an auth guard right here, but I kind of renamed them after I created the actual auth guard service right here. So the auth guard service spec file still thinks that the import I should use is the auth guard, the class right here. So I just have to rename all these guys, and now this beautiful test file is up and running again. That was the first bug. Now that wasn't that important because it would only fail if I started doing tests. So I'm not doing tests right now, so it's not an important one for now. But what is important is if we go into the auth service right here, some of my students caught this. They're saying that, what if you're not getting an auth state back for some reason? What if your user actually fails, right? So there's no logged in user right now. Well, we can do a few things, but what I think we should do as a minimum is kind of to avoid a null reference exception right here. We need to at least just have an if statement here and say if there's no auth state, right, then we should do something. And what I want to do in this time right now, I'll pretty much just add return null right here, just to say if there's no auth state, just end this, right? That's one solution. There are other solutions out there, but that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm avoiding like this. You might end up in a null reference exception right here if there's no auth state. I'm avoiding that now. But of course, I should never call this function or use this function unless I have a reason and I'm actually logged in, right? So I can always do the authenticated test before I actually call the get user. That would make sense. But still, now I'm guarded. That's a lot better. So I have another issue down here in the user service where a student kind of informed me, but what if you don't have a user yet in the database? Now that's a real problem, because I actually might end up not having a user in the database when I'm calling this function, because when I kind of have an empty profile page, I don't have a user available yet. So it pretty much just means that when I'm just creating a totally blank user for my system, signing him up, this will actually be null, right? And if this is null, I'll actually get back a null pointer exception right here. So how do we fix this? Well, let's just change things around a bit. So first of all, I'll do the null check again. So if DB user is actually here, right? So I'll just say if there is a DB user when I'm kind of getting back the user I'm looking for, if he's available, what should I do? Well, what I should do is pretty much just switch these guys around. So what I'm going to do is, this is already set, these two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this around by saying, instead of actually setting the information on the DB user and returning him, I'm going to flip it around and actually return the auth user and just extend the information on him. So the auth user is going to be missing the first name. So let's just add that from the DB user if he is actually there, etc., etc. So here he's going to now add these 4 values that we already have. I'll also add the username. Let's just do that first, because that's the most important one in my mind. Then we have the middle name right here. We'll add that one. And then we have the last name. Now this was the reason I tried to be a smartass and actually tried to change these around, because when I made it in the code, it seemed like less lines of code, but the problem was that I kind of got a problem and a potential null reference exception. So even though sometimes you think you're saving code, you might end up actually causing more harm. So there's actually another thing that can go wrong right here. If you notice, there's actually, when I'm starting using the switch map here, this auth user could actually also be null, right? So we also need to guard ourselves there. So I'll just add a small if statement right here. If the auth user is not there, then I want to actually return an empty observable, right? Because I can't just return null here. You might think just return null, but the problem is that then I would have a potential null reference exception when I actually use the get user function right here, because then I would get a null right here. That's not my goal. The goal is to get an observable back that's empty. So you need to do instead return an empty observable. Now the cool thing is that if we go up here and I'll just do an import, there's actually an empty observable inside the RxJS setup right here, the empty observable. So that's the one we're going to use. Now you can just kind of grab the code from up here if you want to, but it's pretty much just RxJS observable, empty observable. So it's pretty simple to do. And then with this empty observable right here, you just have to say again, return, and then new empty observable, and then I'm done. Now I'm getting not a null reference back that I might end up failing on, but I'm getting a good old observable that I can then subscribe to, and then I'll just get a null value back from that. So that's all we have to do this lesson. Now we fixed the bugs, so let's get back to the real code. Have fun.